The national debt has been skyrocketing. It's nearly quadrupled since 2008. But what's really fueling the surge? Budget deficits are growing as Uncle Sam spends more than he collects. And projections show that interest payments could hit a jaw-dropping 1.7 trillion over the next decade. Here's the twist. Despite these eye-popping numbers, U.S. Treasuries are still seen as the gold standard for stability. And the markets, they've historically shrugged off rising debt levels. Oh, and let's not forget the US dollar still remains the world's reserve currency, for now at least. So what's the real story behind these headlines? Is this a ticking time bomb or just another chapter in a well-worn book? Stick around because we're going to break it all down and explore what it can mean for your investments. Let's dive in. First, let's talk about the national debt. Yeah, it's a huge number. But what does it actually mean for you as an investor? Check out this chart. It shows total and net federal debt relative to GDP. Net debt excludes what Uncle Sam owes himself. Over the last decade, federal debt as a percentage of GDP has climbed steadily. Now here's the kicker. Despite this surge, markets have performed impressively well. And while the $31.4 trillion debt ceiling is suspended until January 25, we've seen Congress kick that can, extend it, or raise it countless times over the years. But what about those nagging worries about the borrowing limits? Unfortunately, there is no crystal clear rule book. Take Japan, for example. They've been operating with a debt to GDP level of over 200% for decades. So here's the bottom line. While the growing debt is worth keeping an eye on, not quite ready to hit that panic button. Let's dive into a classic culprit behind the ballooning national debt, budget deficits. This chart lays it all out. When Uncle Sam spends more than he collects, the national debt gets an upgrade, or I guess a downgrade in that regard. Here's the deal. The U.S. has been running deficits in most years, even though tax revenues have climbed thanks to economic growth. But spending, it's outpacing income like it's on a race to the moon. Deficits tend to spike during major events like recessions, wars, global crises. Think the 2008 financial meltdown, as well as the pandemic of 2020. Now, before we all start stockpiling canned goods, history gives us a bit of a perspective. Economic stabilization usually improves fiscal conditions over time. But don't hold your breath for a surplus anytime soon. The last time we saw one was in the Clinton era with a brief encore in the Nixon administration. All right, let's close it out. Let's talk about federal interest payments because paying off debt isn't just for your credit cards. This chart gives us the lowdown. The blue bars show payments in absolute dollars, while the yellow line tracks them as a percentage of GDP. And those dotted lines, that's a crystal ball predicting interest payments could hit 1.7 trillion in just 10 years. Here's the kicker. Neither major political party seems too eager to tackle this one head on. Yes, the growing debt and interest payments are a big deal, but history reminds us that markets can and do thrive even with fiscal challenges in the background. The real question isn't whether debt is a problem, it's how you as an investor can stay focused on the bigger picture. Have questions or want to chat about how this impacts your portfolio? Reach out. I'm always here to help.